When you got up this morning, did you shower, brush your teeth, do your hair, pack lunches, get everybody out the door on time to catch school buses, commuter buses, or get in the car and go to work? Well, guess what? You were using a workflow. Today on Get Social Health, I'm talking with Chuck Webster. He is the workflow king, and I think you're going to enjoy this conversation on Get Social Health.
Welcome to Get Social Health, a conversation about social media and how it's being used to help hospitals, social practices, healthcare practitioners, and patients connect and engage via social media. Get Social Health brings you conversations with professionals actively working in the field and provides real-life examples of healthcare social media in action. Here is your host, Janet Kennedy.
Welcome to Get Social Health. Today on my podcast, I'm going to get to be the 101 level student because I've got Chuck Webster with me. He's known as @Whereflow in Twitter and in social media, and we're going to talk about workflow process. Keep in mind that I'm representing the marketing social media side of the house, and I'm not heavily involved in an IT operations process. So for those of you in the same boat as me, we're going to really dig in and do some 101. However, if you're on the more technical side of the house, you can just laugh along with us. Chuck, welcome to Get Social Health.
I'm so excited that we finally pulled the trigger on this. I think we've been talking about doing it for, about a year.
It's been a long time, and I know we even scheduled a few times and both had emergencies come up. And I don't talk about technical very often, I have to admit, because I'm a little uncomfortable at sounding like I don't know what I'm talking about. But since I set the groundwork that I get to ask all the dumb questions, we can move ahead with this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great.
All right, so you are known as @Whereflow, and of course, it's not @Workflow. Did somebody already have that Twitter handle?
No. Well, actually, someone did, but maybe I would have grabbed it. But Whereflow, no W at the end, is what the linguists call a portmanteau, which is a combination of two different phrases. And so where is software, and flow is workflow. So software workflow. And then I kind of capitalized the FLO at the end just to be a little distinctive.
Oh, now see, I would have said it means, so where is this going? But in many ways, that actually works too.
Well, no. Actually, also there's Whereflow as in you wear something. I gave a keynote to the Society for Health Systems annual conference last year, and the topic was wearable workflow. So that works too.
Oh, very cool. Well, we may get to that. Well, let's go back a little bit and tell folks who you are who may not know who you are. I see an MD after your name, but that's only two of about a dozen letters. So can you give me a little bit of background of why you're a perennial student?
Yeah.
And what have you gotten your degrees in?
My mother says I'm killing myself by degree. I started out in engineering, and I became interested in healthcare cost savings, efficiency sorts of things. And I ended up with a BSA, a Bachelor's of Science in Accountancy, at the University of Illinois, which, by the way, is the #1 school every year. But because I started in engineering, I had taken all the chemistry, physics, and biology necessary to apply to medical school. I was going to get a PhD in health systems engineering, and my advisor, when she found out that I had taken the courses necessary for medical school, said, you really ought to go to medical school because the MD is the PhD of healthcare. She would do these incredible studies of where to put the air ambulances in the state of Illinois, and the doctors would just kind of ignore her because she was a PhD, which, they're an ivory tower sort of person, and they don't even know what the PhD is. It's not a real doctor. The MD is the real doctor and all of that. I have two other masters. One is in industrial engineering. So industrial engineering is all about usability and workflow. And I spent a year in aviation, human factors, helping to design jet cockpits. And then I spent a year in kind of hospital workflow, actually working with the folks in the student hospital at the University of Illinois, did computer simulations of patient flow. And I ended up getting also along the way a master's in artificial intelligence. That has to do with knowledge, things being smart and enough to understand what needs to be done and to help the users. I have one more degree, which is an ABD, all but dissertation, which means I did all the courses, didn't finish the thesis, and that is in computational linguistics, which is natural language processing. And I did that, or didn't do that, at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh.
Well, golly gee, Chuck. And through all that, how do you contribute to society, truly?
If you intersect the domains, that is, accountancy is about cost, industrial engineering is about workflow, artificial intelligence is about knowledge representation, and medicine at the intersection is workflow technology, because you're representing costs and models of tasks, and you have engines that are doing things efficiently. So pretty much the stuff that I just go on and on and on and on and on and on about right now, if people think of me as Dr. Workflow or the Workflow Bear or the king of all workflow in healthcare, some novelists say that plots are really just driven by character. So if you have a set of characters, there are a certain way you throw them together in an environment, and then the plot just happens. Well, it's kind of like the stuff that I'm interested in, which is healthcare workflow and workflow technology, is very much driven by the degrees I got decades ago.
So you're really a living Venn diagram.
I am. In fact, I have when I give a slide, sometimes a presentation, and you have that slide about yourself. It literally is a Venn diagram. I have 4 circles, and they're all intersected, and they're labeled cost, workflow, representation, and medicine. And at the intersection is workflow technology, or what's called business process management today.
I really want to talk about BPM, or business process management, in a minute, but let's go back a little bit to your early career where you've finished all this here schooling, and now you're going to start to apply it. Were you always focused in the healthcare space?
Yes, but I've kind of systematically kept. If you think of me as an octopus with a bunch of legs, so I keep the other 7 legs in other areas. I'm a bit of a dilettante in the sense that I delve into other industries. So I spent a year in aviation human factors, so I follow what's happening in the aviation industry. My wife is a well-known consultant in customer service and leadership in the hospitality industry, and I do this kind of systematically because there's all kinds of stuff you can borrow, safety from aviation, high touch experience from hospitality, and so that's kind of I'm always borrowing from other industries.
It's only a matter of time before we have the Disney doctor course. It's coming anytime.
You know what? I think it already exists. I think.
So I'm wondering about when you first started talking about workflow in healthcare. And obviously you need to be speaking to senior C-level executives at hospital systems. Did they get it, or was it an alien concept? Is this something that they were very comfortable grasping because this is kind of in a technical world and not super soft skill? Or was this something you were having to evangelize about what exactly is workflow and why is it important?
Basically, education and evangelizing and marketing all work together because I was chief medical informatics officer for an electronic health record vendor for over a decade, a small one, and they not so coincidentally. I sought them out. It made sense. They were an electronic health record built on workflow management technology. That a workflow engine, users could design their own workflows, and then the engine would interpret them. People complain about workflow all the time. It doesn't fit what they want to do. Well, then in this case, you can change the workload or the software's workflow to fit the human workflow. However, in selling that to the rest of the world, you had to educate people. A lot of people think workflow is boring, and maybe it is, but it's still all purposeful human activity involves some form of workflow, which is a sequence of actions consuming resources, achieving goals. But it's a little dry and it's a little foreign because health IT is really all about data, not about workflow, which is part of the problem, in my opinion. And so there was a lot of both education and entreaties trying to tantalize people to get them interested in workflow. And then once you got them interested, got their attention, kind of the education component, and then finally I'm really not all about workflow. I'm really about workflow technology, which, of course, as soon as you start talking about technology, and then people's eyes start to glaze. So it has been an upward battle for a couple of decades, but I see lots of interesting flowers blooming in the spring, so to speak, at this moment, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years in health IT regarding better workflow, better software that supports human workflow better.
I'm picturing in my mind Leonardo da Vinci and his mind mapping. Am I on the right track? Is that really what we're talking about? Is here's all these things that happen. Now, how do they come together?
Well, okay. That's sort of up till now when I talk about all these different domains and how they connect, yes. But I think you put your finger on it. You know how when you draw a mind map, you label a concept and then you put down another concept and you draw an arrow between them. And you use this for brainstorming and for people to communicate. But imagine that your mind map is of a workflow. That is, you're actually drawing a workflow. The workflow has 3 steps, and each step has certain qualities or processes or resources or goals, and you draw little arrows off to those things. And when you get done, you've got this, 12 or 13 balloons with, a dozen or 18 lines and some labels, but then you push a button and it turns into an actual application. Okay, so a computer, while this was created by a non-programmer, and it's at the level of the domain, so you can have a doctor say, okay, describe your workflow. The doctor describes their workflow, and then you have this specialized software called a workflow engine that actually goes and mechanically looks at that drawing and says, okay, well, this is the step I'm on. This is the screen I need to show this person. Now that step has been completed. Now this is the screen I need to show that person. So I like I'm trying to pivot here from this idea of mind map as a graphical representation of something to the idea of a graphical representation of workflow, which is essentially what workflow technology is.
All right, now I have a picture in my head, and I wonder if this is the correct vision here. So you have a meeting, and people are walking through, I do this, then I do this, and I do this, and I do this, and it all goes into this really smart machine. Now, is this machine just translating it into a capturable process, something software-driven, or is it able to actually use some of your artificial intelligence to say, wait a minute, you're out of step here. Yeah. You've in the wrong sync here, and wouldn't it be better to have step 4 as step 3?
Yes, absolutely. You're seeing workflow technology. And now, academics call this process-aware technology, and that's because and when they say aware, they don't mean it's conscious. They just mean that it can introspect. It has a representation of a process, and it can reason about it. And a lot of these systems have got machine learning that can watch the behavior of the system and note and spot the bottlenecks or spot the rework. Things, if some step happens over and over again, well, then maybe you need to change the workflow so it doesn't happen over and over again. In the natural language processing world, there are technologies out there in which you basically feed the software a bunch of natural language, basically the corporate description, the corporate documentation that is full of organizational charts and lots of workflow descriptions, and you feed them into the system, and it actually constructs a workflow diagram that you can then critique. So it can either take one that is created by hand, compare it to the evidence, and then improve it, or in some cases it can perhaps even create a draft version to show the humans, and then the humans can look at it and critique it. Ultimately, the proof is in the pudding. That is, when the workflow engine runs against the representation of workflow, it either creates a nice experience that is efficient and effective, or if it isn't, if there are like points that are kind of, that are raw or rub or sharp, then you can go in and people can go back and iteratively improve it. And so it really fits into what the health IT people call agile development, except it's agile development kind of at the level of workflow.
Have you ever found in working with groups where you might have a number of people part of this process who don't normally interact with each other, that you come out with a workflow that is totally contrary or so different from the way they had envisioned it because they didn't realize, that this piece over here needed that piece, or that maybe here's like, we do this every day, and it turns out if they did it the way they said they did it, it's a 3-week process.
All the time. This even before workflow technology came along. if you got a bunch of people together and by hand you got them all in the room together, and I did this at a community hospital in Pittsburgh where we covered the walls of a boardroom with the white butcher paper, and we used Sharpies, and we brought people in from all over the hospital, and so the workflow from this department would lead to the workflow in this department would lead to the workflow in this department, and we tried to create a giant workflow diagram of all the processes, of all the workflows in the hospital. And people would say, well, that's not the way it is, and someone else will say, no, it is the way it is. And then so there's a way of getting people on the same page, so literally in this case, sheet. Now that you can take data out of electronic health records and other systems, so when someone clicks on a button, they did something at a particular time, now we have evidence-based workflow. And so you can show people, it's called process mining. Process mining is like data mining, except it's applied to all of that timestamp data that's in the electronic health record and other health IT systems. And you can generate a process map. You show that to people, and they'll say, that's not what I do. And you say, well, let's drill down here. You were on this screen, and you click this button on this date. You didn't do that? And they'll look at it, and they'll say, oh, yeah, I did do that. Well, I guess you're right. I forgot to tell you about that.
Well, who could remember all the details,
right.
number
Absolutely.
one? But give me an example of how this workflow might work. Is this something you'd use to say, hey, why are lab results taking so long?
Yes, absolutely. Imagine, okay, so you've got this loop where you were writing something or you're clicking on something, and then some time passes, and then something arrives. Some and in between a bunch of stuff has to happen, like specimens have to be collected, and then within the laboratory information system there are multiple steps of workflow and levels of quality assurance and so forth, and all of that is sort of in our current workflow oblivious health IT systems is opaque. It's a black box. So you push the button, you don't know what happens, and then finally you get it. But if it takes too long, wouldn't it be great if you had a process map that showed you every little step of the journey that your lab order went through, and you can then say, wait a minute, why did it sit here for a week? And someone can go, sometimes it's a red face. They go, I was on vacation. And then you can change the workflow so it doesn't happen again.
How about from a patient's perspective? Why do I care about workflow, and how would it apply to me?
Well, there's two interesting angles there, and the first is I've seen studies that have shown that for a chronic condition and an operation related to it, there may be 20, 30 touch points between the health system and the individual, and you're talking maybe over a dozen various clinicians. And if these people are asking for the same information over and over again, or they are the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and the lack of coordination is obvious, then you're going to lose confidence in the system. And so that's the system behind the smiles. So in the hospitality industry, you walk in and the room is ready and you go right in, but there's all this stuff, there's all this back end stuff that had to happen. And that in that front end, where you've got the staff and they're smiling and they're nice and they're saying, yes, ma'am, here you go, here's your key. They can't do that. They're not free to live their organizational ideals unless they can just count on all the workflows in the systems, many of which are IT systems, work perfectly. So you don't know and you don't want to know how all the magical stuff happens, but someone has to figure that out and make sure that it works perfect or well enough. The other aspect of that is that patients and humans, even if they're not in the hospital, they have you and I have personal workflows. We have workflows that we use to make breakfast and to multitask between, while we're talking to someone, or we know exactly how long something is going to take to wash or to cook. And these you could be called life flows, okay? And these life flows are interacting with, for example, notification systems in our smartphone, in our smartwatches, our fridges, our appliances, and all of them are networked together, and they all need to be coordinated too. Now, if you're at home and you've got all kinds of healthcare related monitoring, at that Internet of Things IoT level, you also need these life flows to be coordinated. I'll give you an example. notifications. So, you get a ding, you look at your, smartphone. Well, if you've got 3 smartphones, sometimes you hear 3 dings. You've got your watch. Well, you need a system that says, wait a minute, all we need to do is deliver one notification. We just need to make sure that it's delivered in the right time and in the right manner. And that's kind of a classic workflow management system, workflow engine responsibility.
Wait, can you tell me how to do that? Because it's killing me.
I know, no, it's funny. I was on I can't remember who it was. Might have been Jared Piano, and all of a sudden I heard like about 12 dings on his side. Yeah, smart notifications are definitely coming. And that's going to be, and you can think about notification. Oh, so for example, patient instructions and reminders to take their medication and so forth. You don't want 7 different identical, reminders, but you may not be wearing your watch. And so the system needs to say, well, we're going to send it to the watch. Oh, wait a minute, they didn't respond. Now we're going to escalate it. So that all of those rules that you use when you're trying to deliver a message and then you don't receive evidence that the task was accomplished, and then it gets escalated to the next level, and then it might even be escalated to a human. You see, it's like if someone doesn't push the button on their smart pill dispenser saying, yes, I consume that pill, you may get a knock on the door from your mom, who's someone who's agreed to sort of participate in this semi-automated life flow. So I know that sounds like science fiction, but there are startups and folks working on exactly the scenario that I'm talking about.
Well, especially from the standpoint of our desire to be living at home
yes.
as long as possible. But that does mean that there needs to be some kind of monitoring and some kind of awareness, particularly as we have so many generations who are not living near each other.
I originally wanted to become an anthropologist, okay, and I didn't do it, basically because the job prospects for anthropologists apparently are not so hot. But anthropology is about workflow in culture and in human groups. So, for example, when I define workflow to be a series of steps consuming resources, achieving goals, a series of steps can be a ritual or a series of steps in some coordinated activity. And a field anthropologist conducting ethnography is sitting there writing notes, and he's basically writing down workflow notation of an anthropological sort. And consuming resources, well, it's consuming animal carcasses, it's consuming the time of folks, it's achieving goals. Those goals may be sustenance, safety, protection from the elephants, group cohesion. And so anthropologists are very much kind of like industrial engineers in the sense that they go in and they document these workflows, although the languages and the notations are different. And you can easily imagine these applied anthropologists working together with the kind of workflow-aware health IT startups of the world to create the kind of digital support at home so that it just sort of fits seamlessly into kind of the living life flows of those folks who are being supported at home.
That's a world we all need to have, because as we age and the boomers start to outnumber the young people who are able to care for them, we're going to need more digital tools to keep us mobile, on time, taking our right meds, and indeed giving us, reminders or giving us connection to other people.
I'll say this, and I frequently get into sometimes rather strong debates, and people keep talking about, I want my data. Well, guess what? I don't want my data. I want my workflow. I want reminders. I want nudges. I want to know what to do next. The only reason people really want their data is because they need to be their own workflow systems. I have to get the data from you so I can take it over to you. Well, what if I didn't have to get the data from you to take it over to you so that you could then make the decision to remind me to take the pill I need to take? And that's really workflow. So what I think people really want is they want control over these life flows and workflows around them that are working on their behalf, although even though they're kind of, maybe irritating and nudging and nagging, and it's less about, I want to be able to download, all my files in electronic format.
Honestly, I don't want my data because I don't know what I'd be looking at.
Yeah, right.
So it doesn't really help me. Well, let me ask you a question about who is this person in a healthcare environment? Obviously, you do consulting work, and you come in and you help healthcare organizations with specific problems and situations, but you're not there all the time. So is there a position in hospitals and healthcare systems that you would be if you were there? And what's it called? Because nobody's going to go get 5 degrees in order to become you.
Well, it's every year in U.S. News and World Reports or whatever, you'll see it'll show you a list of 10 job occupation that won't exist in 5-10 years. And so yes, there. I've talked about you talk about C-level individuals as being kind of bellwethers. Okay, so you have the chief transformation officer, chief innovation officer, chief engagement officer. Well, I'm starting to see chief process officer. Okay, you can just Google chief process officer and it'll tell you salaries. And the thing is that people talk about these silos of data, and I say don't think about it in terms of silos of data. Think about it of silos of workflow. Okay, because what you're trying to do is link up workflows between these silos so that they work together seamlessly, and that's a very much of a yes, you're right. Someone shouldn't have to go and get 5 or 6 degrees. But I was an assistant professor, and I designed the first undergraduate degree in medical informatics back in the 90s, and it's designing a curriculum. And as you know, because you do curriculum design as part of your social media outreach and education, is a kind of an exciting intellectual thing, because you got to look ahead into the future. You got to predict where things are going. You got to say, okay, I'm going to take a little bit of this, I'm going to put it together in a certification and a degree or whatever. And so, yes, I think that you're going to see. Some of these folks are industrial engineers. Some of them are nurses who go and get a certification in IT, but kind of fall in with the right group in terms of, I don't really want to be a data analyst, but I don't mind being a workflow analyst, because that's closer to touching the user, whether that user is a clinician or an admin or perhaps even a patient.
Interesting. Well, I do think that's very exciting, because there are a lot of healthcare providers who have unique skills. I think of all the physicians that I've interviewed who are really technology nuts. Yep. They're in social media because they really like the engagement. They like the communication method. They like being on a cutting edge. And I think once you've been experienced in a large system, it would be very sad to retire to the golf course, because even if you're maybe too tired to keep up with the very heavy workload of a physician or a nurse, this is such a great application for your knowledge base. Yeah, and and the great thing about, you don't have to be a computer scientist to be to be able to map workflows. If you want to program, you got to learn C# or Java, and then take a database course and an operating system course. Well, but you can learn to create, and you have to do all of those things in order to create an application. Okay, in the workflow technology world, someone who, it doesn't matter where they come from. What's most important is that they understand the domain, and that means that they understand their workflows and the workflows of the folks that they are trying to help. So these are you think about business analysts. You think of these as clinical workflow analysts, and then they don't have to be a Java programmer, because these systems are what's called less code or low code or codeless. You can basically create an application without having to write all of that text down and compile it and fight through. So there's an opportunity to bring the people who really understand the domain workflows together with the platforms that will allow them to create their own applications. They call these citizen developers. It's happening in other industries. A citizen developer is you think of a citizen soldier. A citizen soldier is someone who is a volunteer, or or in some countries you have to serve a couple of years, but then you have to keep the rifle under your bed like they do in Switzerland, so that locked up, by the way. So you think citizen soldiers. These are folks that are doing something important for the rest of everybody else because they can and because they should. And I think we're going to see something like that in healthcare software. We're going to see citizen developers. I mean, it's already happening. You're seeing a lot.
in fact, it's happened for decades, and that is there are companies out there that some doctor in some area got together with his brother-in-law or sister-in-law who was a programmer, or vice versa, and then they build an application. Is now a multi-billion-dollar company. But today, with the technology, that can happen, much more quickly and less expensively.
There was actually an article that came out, if not this week, then maybe last week, but it basically talked about innovation needs to be coming from the medical side of the fence and not from the innovative entrepreneurial side of the fence. And there's many schools of thought on that. But the bottom line to this article was it's really physicians and nurses who know what problems need to be solved. They need the digital health partners to make that come to pass, as opposed to the 6,000th app to manage your calorie count.
Yeah, and now the great thing about workflow technology is you'll often hear folks saying or bemoaning that we don't have clinicians more involved in the design of software before it's implemented or deployed. Well, guess what? With workflow technology software, you can design it after it's deployed. You see, because you can put that workflow in there, that you can draw out the approximately correct workflow. You can put it in, and it can be changed on the run. So you can swap two steps by just dragging and dropping. You don't have to go all the way back to the health IT vendor. So yes, it's important that we get clinicians involved in the design of workflow, both before and after. And it's that after that is so important, because that's when you actually see whether it works or not. That's when you say, oh my gosh, we forgot this. We got to add this step.
Let me ask you a question about an actual workflow process. So you've gone in and you've mapped out, OR prep or something like that. How often should a workflow be reevaluated?
Oh, gosh, that's going to be case-by-case basis. It depends on how close okay, so when you draw out this workflow and then you double-click on all the icons and you set some properties, these are the business rules that are about escalation, or, when this step is executed, I want an SMS sent to, this phone. If you do a really, really good job up front, then, it's kind of like day one. Wow, this really works great. And then there's just a couple of little tweaks. On the other hand, if you get something out there that is, kind of only halfway thought through, and when I say only halfway thought through, a lot of the workflows in healthcare are so complicated and maybe so almost illogical to some people that you really can't do better than half thought through. And it's in those situations that you're probably, it's going to be like an exponential function. But that means it's going to start up high and then it's going to drop down and get less and less. And now whether that happens over a week or a month. But I will tell you that workflow technology software is one of the things that it does really, really well is it avoids these like multi-year implementations that you hear about. The electronic health record, it took them 2 years to implement the electronic health record. And that's because the cost of changing the software after it's been deployed is so high and it's so laborious that it slows you down, and it's so expensive. And that's when you hear about these multi-$100 million situations, some of which have sunk hospitals or CIO or even CEO careers, and with workflow technology, you can change the workflows after you've implemented it.
Now, without naming names, Epic, do you find that these big companies are actually open to outside consultants or client feedback on what's not working, or are they so wrapped up in their own workflow process that it is like, stopping a speeding train? Yeah,
well, it may be getting better, but like a couple of years ago, I did a focus group, 2-day focus group at Chime down in Scottsdale with 40 CIOs from UCLA and Tufts all across the U.S. Unfortunately, part of the reaction was, we really love this workflow technology stuff. We get all the logic that you and I have talked about. They said the problem is that meaningful use has sucked all of the air out of the room. We have we're so focused on getting that, subsidy. We don't have any excess resources or attention to try anything innovative. Now, I think as meaningful use becomes a bit longer in the tooth, I think we're going to see stuff improve. The problem is that meaningful use is being relabeled, and now you got MACRA, and it's being resold. So, the jury is out on that. I think ultimately, in every other industry, applications have followed an evolutionary pathway. Back in the 60s and 70s, all the software was all mixed together. The data was in. So you have two applications, and the data is separate. I mean, that's the classic situation where you have to re-enter the data. Then they pulled the data out and they shared it in a database, and then in the next evolution they pulled the user interface out. So when you click on a button, the application isn't responsible for the button. It's the operating system, Windows or Mac OS. And the application just says, make a button and find out what the user wants. Well, now what's happening is a workflow is being taken out of these applications. So you can have a bunch of different applications, and the workflow is all represented in a single place, and the workflow engine is running against it. And that evolution that I have just described has happened in every other industry. Healthcare, health IT is 10 to 20 years behind other industries. It is inevitable. The only question is how fast. And so one of my roles, self-anointed roles, is to try to accelerate that evolution toward these process-aware systems, because the workflow obliviousness of the health IT that we've implemented may, and this sounds a bit florid to say, but may be killing us.
Well, one of the things you mentioned to me in our pre-interview conversation was trying to recruit some of the top minds and vendors in the workflow tech area to come into healthcare. What's the problem? Is there no welcome mat out there, or they see healthcare as too long a play?
A little of both. So I go to, probably 3 or 4 or 5 business process management conferences a year, and they are looking at the multi-trillion-dollar healthcare industry, in which people estimate a third or a half is waste and administrative stuff, and they say that's ideal for automating with workflow technology. On the other hand, healthcare is kind of like a foreign country. It's like when I went to medical school. There are all these new words and acronyms, and it's all very confusing, and it's hard to prioritize. And so part of the problem is that they kind of don't know how to productize. Okay, and so I help them with that. And the other thing is that often someone will find them, someone from healthcare who's kind of like at wit's end will go outside of healthcare. They'll bring in this workflow technology vendor. Sometimes they're called adaptive case management, dynamic case management, business process management, and they'll have a success. Okay, a one-up. Okay, and then the question was, how do we pivot from that? We've got a foot in this healthcare organization's door, and it'll often be in human resources or in the insurance industry, in the payer side. Basically, as far because those are areas of healthcare that are most similar to other industries. So you're going to see, the earlier successful importation of workflow technology in those areas. But what happens is the CIO gets a look, or there are a lot of CIOs that are coming from other industries, and they already know about workflow technology. I've seen job ads for both CEO and CIO in which the job said, literally, this is in the job ad, literally says, not only is no healthcare experience required, it is disallowed. Do not apply if you are coming from healthcare. We want people from the airline industry, the hospitality industry, who are using this kind of technology. It really, part of the reason that I'm on social media is that when I worked for a health IT vendor, the sales cycle is very long. It can be 9 months or more, where you've got to wine and dine and get through to the right people, and then maybe you get shot down right at the end. And so you're investing a lot of time in one-of situations. I've got almost 10,000 followers. I got a lot of CIOs, CMIOs, and so what I'm doing is trying to put a lot of great educational content out there about workflow technology to 10,000, because I don't know who is going to bite. It's like fishing, you see. So you got to go someplace where there's a lot of fish. And so I spend a lot of my time creating content, getting those people sort of listening to me. So I kind of ran on that, but you kind of got my point.
Well, and you also have written recently on this and are going to be in a book. What's that?
In the business process management industry, I believe the publisher is Future Strategies. They write a line of business process management books, and with the Workflow Management Coalition, there's a yearly award. So I've been a judge for the business process management and the case management awards for excellence. And what they do is they just basically send me all the healthcare stuff. Okay, which I'm happy to do. I think I've done that for about 5 years. And so I've had chapters appear in 3 or 4 of their books on knowledge workers and business process management, and there'll be kind of like a token healthcare chapter, and that's, mine. But now they're putting out together a collection of chapters that are based on successful applications for these awards for excellence in business process management, case management. One of the chapters is mine, which had appeared in a previous edition, but I'm also writing the foreword, and I'm delighted to do that because, obviously I say nice things about business process management and healthcare, but I also get to talk about, the genesis of my interest, which we've already somewhat covered.
Awesome. Well, Chuck, I am so enlightened. And for a guy with lots of letters after your name, this was an incredibly friendly, down-to-earth, and understandable conversation.
Thank you for saying that. And by the way, Janet, I've enjoyed all of our interactions on Blab, for example, and hope that we will have more wonderful social interactions. It doesn't have to be about workflow; it can just be about healthcare in general.
Awesome. Oh, okay. So I am going to ask quickly. You tried out a new platform yesterday called Fire Talk. Yep. How'd it go?
It went very well. I was very impressed. It does about 85% of what Blab did, and it does a couple of other things that Blab didn't do. So I encourage people. I'm on Fire Talk. I am firetalk.com/wareflow, and that's 7 letters, no W at the end. WAREFLO. Firetalk.com. And what you do is you use your Twitter account, or I think also Google or Facebook. You register with them. You have a profile, and then you create a channel, and that channel is always on. And so basically, I put a bunch of YouTubes on there, and the YouTubes just run in a circle. So anytime anybody goes there, they can see, and a lot of these YouTubes are of blabs that I did that I, downloaded and put over on YouTube, but now I can bring them back in. And then what happens is you basically interrupt that channel with live video of where you kind of have 2 or 3 or 4 people, just like on Blab, and there's an audience and comments, and it's integrated with Twitter and social media, and you can schedule something. And now the thing that's interesting about Fire Talk, part of the reason Blab went away is it really didn't have a good monetization strategy, and Fire Talk allows you to have free shows, but it allows you to sell tickets. So you're probably going to see musicians and so forth take advantage of that, and I'm hoping the fact that they do have a monetization strategy will keep them around, because I really like them.
Oh, that's great. Well, I promise I will be there at the next one, or I'll be hosting one myself soon.
Yes.
And, of course, you can find me. Just look for Get Social Health, and that's my Twitter, my website, my podcast, and now my Fire Talk site.
Yay!
Well, Chuck, thanks so much for being here. I look forward to our future conversations, and you are now my go-to workflow man.
Viva la workflow.
All righty. Well, thanks so much for being here, Chuck, and I look forward to talking again soon.
And now, here's your social media success tip.
Hi, this is Sarah Bramblett at Born to Be Fat. And my tip for social media is make sure you spell your medical condition right whenever you create a hashtag for it.
You've been listening to the Get Social Health podcast. The show notes are located at getsocialhealth.com. To join our healthcare social media journey, follow at Get Social Health on Twitter and start a conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Get Social Health podcast. I'd like to share an exciting new project with you called Social Content Solutions. I know how hard it is to create content for your social media sites. It's a never-ending process. For the smaller healthcare practice, generating the volume of relevant, valuable, and engaging posts can be very time-consuming and very frustrating if you don't have a marketing background or any social media training or, how much time have you got? That's why the Get Social Health Academy created Social Content Solutions. It's a monthly subscription program providing you healthcare relevant content ready to post, plus content ideas that will be easy to implement in your practice. The package also includes content calendars for the upcoming months, timely blog templates to ease you into blogging, and a newsletter of curated social media news. If you work in a small healthcare practice, this content will give you the foundational support for a strong presence in Facebook in a safe, HIPAA-compliant manner. Visit GetSocialHealthAcademy.com/social-content-solutions for details or to order. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week on Get Social Health.